Toronto. VK on the beat. Check. I'm in Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm from Toronto where you wanna get the city love. I'm in Toronto like we wanna get the city love. My city love me back for my city love.
Welcome to episode 1231 of Toronto Mic'd. Proudly brought to you by Great Lakes Brewery, a fiercely independent craft brewery who believes in supporting communities, good times, and brewing amazing beer. Order online for free local home delivery in the GTA. Palma Pasta. Enjoy the taste of fresh, homemade Italian pasta and entrees from Palma Pasta in Mississauga and Oakville. Season 4 of Yes, We Are Open, the award-winning podcast from Moneris. Electronic Products Recycling Association. Committing to our planet's future means properly recycling our electronics of the past. The Moment Lab. Brand marketing and strategy, PR, advertising and production. You need the Moment Lab. And Ridley Funeral Home, pillars of the community since 1921. Joining me today, a man who has seen more Blue Jay games than any other Toronto scribe. So says Bob Elliott, Larry Millson. Welcome, Larry.
Oh, good to be here.
Is Bob right? Bob says to me, straight out, he says, Larry has seen the Blue Jays more often than any other Toronto scribe. True or false, Larry?
I think that's probably true because there are some seasons I basically did 162 games. And I started out in 1980 doing the Blue Jays. And I saw a few as a spectator before then. So I'm sure the total's high. I'm afraid to count it up.
But, that's quite the claim, though, because, you know, I'm thinking now of I'm thinking of Dave Perkins. I'm just thinking of some of the longtime scribes. Dave, who I was hanging out with last week, by the way, but we'll get to that. But
Dave's an old friend of mine. We used to be neighbors.
Okay.
And we also worked at the Globe. Both kind of a little bit of cynical. We used to take on the Leafs fans. He was on the desk, and I was a reporter, but I'd fill in on the desk once in a while, and they didn't like us very much.
So last week, and I'll probably reference it a few times because it just happened on, I want to say Thursday night. So just last Thursday night, I was with Dave Perkins, and he says to me, call me anytime. And I said, careful, Dave, like I might do that. And he goes, seriously? Like he's like, call me anytime. So now I'm envisioning an episode with Bob Elliott, Dave Perkins, and Larry Millson on the three mics, just talking about covering the Blue Jays.
Oh, that'd be fun.
You know what? I can make that happen. Like,
well,
I think I'm going to do it. Okay, we're going to do this. Okay,
we'll do it. I'll do it.
All right, that's it. Done. Well, Dave said anything, and yeah, I just got to get Bob Elliott. He spends some time in the Maritimes now. Like, I think he's got a grandkids in
yes, he does.
Moncton, I think.
I've just been chatting with Bob via email up until last night. I was just joking about, do you think Chris Bassett needs another pitch? And Bob says, well, I heard has eight of them.
That was quite the Toronto Blue Jay debut. For a little while, he had no ERA because he had allowed, 3 or 4 runs without getting an out.
Yeah.
Like, we need an out. Yeah, we need an out to get an ERA on this guy. But hopefully it gets better from there.
Oh, I think it will. I think that's the nature of the game. I mean, that's his worst game, I guess, he's ever had. But I'm sure coming to a new team and et cetera, and I think St. Louis is a really good hitting team.
Right.
And maybe when you have so many pitches that maybe you need to narrow it down a little bit sometimes, go with what's working that day. He was getting his pitches. I know that he threw a changeup for his first pitch of the game, but you got it high. If you throw a high changeup to a decent hitter, it's gone. And even to a bad, they always say, don't throw a changeup to a bad hitter.
Well, I don't even think you should start a batter with a changeup because the whole idea of a changeup is that you throw in some velocity and now you throw something.
You want to speed a guy's bat up, I think, and then you know, and then get them to go for it.
Because my fastball is like a changeup, right? So it's like, here's my heat, and it's like, boom, okay.
That's about all I ever could hit was changeup because I was a bad hitter.
Right, but only if it was the only pitch that the pitcher had. Okay, so Larry, we have a lot of ground to cover. A lot of people wrote in when they heard you were coming on. Brian Gerstein writes in, he says, Larry was in the Blue Jays press box for 5 of the club's division titles and both World Series triumphs, and he has likely written more articles about the club than any other reporter from the. He says, he reminds us, and congratulations that you won the 2016 Jack Graney Award.
Yeah.
So he was curious. Firstly, do you have any idea of how many articles you've had published in the Globe and Mail about the Blue Jays? Like, you don't have any concept of the number, do you?
No, I know I would lead the whole newspaper in bylines some years, but I did other sports too, and I'm still doing them. I'm still covering the Blue Jays.
Okay, who do you cover the Blue Jays for right now?
I work for field level media now. I left the Globe in 2009 and never stopped working. I worked for MLB.com,
right?
Canadian Press. I covered a lot of games for Canadian Press, Blue Jays games, and a lot of other sports. Then in 2013, I went to the Sports Exchange, which we had to cover every home game of the Blue Jays, Raptors, and Maple Leafs. And then that went kaput in December 31st, 2017. And now, but out of that sprung field level media.
Okay.
Which I still do. I think I did 92 Blue Jays games for them last year.
Wow.
So but yeah, I'm still doing. Take the 3 teams. I bet you do 180 game stories a year.
Wow.
And half of them would be on the Blue Jays.
Any plans to retire? Like, is it no point in retiring when your job is covering sports? Is that the deal? Like Larry, would you ever consider retirement?
Retire? What's that? How do you spell that?
So that's a no. Okay, I don't want you to retire.
No, I'm only 80. What the heck?
You're 80 years old.
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say,
and somebody still hires me. How do you like that?
Okay, so no ageism in sports media in this country, as far as you're concerned. No ageism.
No.
Okay.
Just maybe sometimes younger people roll your eyes when you tell them something, but sometimes it turns out to be right.
Do you ever get like an okay boomer? Is that the reaction you get?
No, I'm a little older than a boomer, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm doing the math in my head. So if it's post-World War II, it means you got to be born in 45. Were you
No, I was born in 43.
Okay, then you are, that would be the greatest generation.
I think so. I think we were.
Okay, you're the greatest. I just had this chat with a gentleman over. The greatest generation.
That's
funny. Congrats to you for remaining active into your 80s. That's awesome. But, Richard Flohill was here the other day.
Yeah, you know what? I actually worked with him. You know what? I worked with him once, and I was going to Ryerson, and and I also knew his sister. His sister worked at the same place I did. So anyway,
yeah.
When I was going to Ryerson, the first time I met Richard was it was at a furniture show, I think. It was some kind of a show like that.
Yeah.
And so, being a journalism student, I decided to practice journalism because we were putting out a daily newspaper for this show. And so I wrote a story that said it wasn't positive. It sort of raised questions. I don't know, the guys were saying, well, I don't know how this is going to work out and all that sort of stuff, which is not what they wanted. And poor Richard, he got it from the guy who was running the thing. And he had us all up there, and we were vilified pretty well, and he kept calling Richard an idiot. So we had to write a story the next day saying everything's perfect. This show,
well,
this
PR,
is going to
right?
be great.
Right.
So yeah, I know him from way back.
Oh, that's wild. Okay, because he was pretty. I don't know. Maybe that was 3 weeks ago. I've lost track of time. But 89 years young and still
going.
Good
for him.
Good on him. Good for you. Now, Mark Hebscher writes in just one word: legend. Okay, Larry, how do you feel being called a legend by a legend, Mark Hebscher?
I don't know. No, I mean, it's... that's for things that other people to say, I just keep going, that's all.
All right, question came in just this morning from Gare Joyce. Gare Joyce is going to be here tomorrow.
Oh.
You know Gare, right?
Oh, yeah, really well.
From the Globe. Gare was at the Globe, right?
He was at the Globe at the same time we were here.
So he says, ask Larry about Terry Hansey. I hope I said the last.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So Terry Hansey, they always did spring trainings together. Take
Yeah.
a moment, and Garrett would love it if you could talk a moment about Terry Hansey.
Well, Terry and I were good friends, and he would, I would let him stay at the Globe and Mail condominium. We'd rent a condominium, and then, but then because I don't have a driver's license, he would do the driving. So it was a trade-off, right? And so we'd go to every game, and at spring training, we went to every game, not just the home games. And he's a terrific photographer, and he was doing it. A lot of his work was for the team program that he was obviously doing at spring training. And yeah, we had some pretty long drives, including flat tires on the one flat tire. I remember right on the going to Lakeland there, and anyway, that worked out okay. So Terry was pretty handy with that, and we always I remember with Terry we always had the park close because he had all this camera equipment to
Sure.
look, you know. And then we also had some good times at Eddie's, which is our local hangout in Dunedin. Was a great bar when it was just normal people. Right now they've tried to, under new ownership, you know, they always try to upgrade stuff, and it's still okay.
Now they're not normal people. They're trying to get rich people. Is that what they're doing?
Not
No.
necessarily. Just people who think they're trendy somehow.
Oh,
you know, not all of them, but it's just a little too fancy now. You know,
Gotcha.
I don't feel comfortable in fancy bars. But I used to shoot the hoops there. Terry would be at the bar, and I'd be shooting the Papa Shot game, putting up records. And if you got a certain score, they give you a free beer, right?
Right.
So I kept hitting the score and getting a free beer. So the next day, the total that you had to reach would go up. And I got to know the owner really well, Eddie. And so anyway, he finally gave up on that because I got pretty good at that game. And I actually challenged this is supposed to be about Terry, but he was at the bar, and I was doing this, and I played that Papa Shot game with people like David Wells and
Oh wow, Boomer.
Kelly Gruber,
Wow.
lots of people. I remember once I had beat those guys. Mark Eichhorn could shoot with either hand, and we came to a standoff. He had he could shoot with either hand equally. He did that when he was a good basketball player at junior college, and he was totally ambidextrous. He could probably have pitched left-handed.
Wow.
And so I remember once Boomer got a little frustrated because he wasn't beating me. And so he missed one, and he took one of the balls, and he threw it against the rim, and it bounced. So it bounced, and I could see people's valuable beers maybe getting knocked over, right?
Right.
So I go and dove for it to make sure the ball didn't get too far into the table area, and I came back and Boomer said, "Bet you never seen a guy dive for a ball on Papa Shot."
So it sounds like with that game, you know, you could get a free beer. So you're a man
Yeah,
who
well,
you like free beer, right?
I did. Yeah, I have not in the last 20 years. Or
Oh,
so,
not in the
but
last 20 years. But listen,
I that might be part of the legend. I could. I did consume a few.
okay, can I send you home today with some free beer? Could I do that?
Sure.
Okay, so thank you, Great Lakes Beer. They sent over some fresh craft beer for you, Larry.
Okay, thank you,
And
Great
you're going to
Lakes.
go home with some fresh craft beer. Now, coincidentally, they have a location here in southern Etobicoke that I frequent, but they also have a new brew pub. It's at Jarvis and Queens Quay. And I was biking there just today because I'm going to record live from there next Thursday. So I'm doing this ride on the Waterfront Trail, which means I'm passing like Lakeshore and Stadium Road, they call it. It's really close to Bathurst. And they have the condo tower that has the Tip Top Tailor sign on it, where the Tip Top Tailors used to be. And guess what I start thinking about? I start thinking about a place I've never been to. The stadium where the Toronto
Maple Leaf
Leafs
Stadium.
played. Yeah. Okay, Maple Leaf Stadium.
Yep.
Tell me about your relationship with Maple Leaf Stadium and the Toronto Maple Leafs that played there.
I probably went to my first game when I was 7 years old with my dad. And I remember the first game. they didn't play very well. And my father yelling out, "You bunch of clowns." I went to games a lot, and eventually I ended up selling programs there. And I could have sold a lot more programs if I'd had the outside the stadium as the people are coming in.
Right.
I could have stolen a lot more programs, but that's not what I wanted. I took inside. That way I could watch the game.
Smart.
And they would never let me come back into the room and cash out until I had sold all the programs. And I'm sure by about the 6th or 7th inning, because, people are gonna buy it outside, right? I think sure some people bought the program either to shut me up or out of sympathy. But I did that for a while. And at the last home game, we didn't know that at the time, in was it 67, I caught a foul ball.
Awesome.
It hit one of the beams there and bounced right back, and it was cold. I put up my hand and got it. So, and you know what? Of course, not thinking that should be a treasure. Of course, when we went out for a few beers after the game, my friend of mine, Paul Vickers, and I were playing catch with the ball on Yonge Street.
Right.
And then I put it in my glove, which I'd oiled. So all of a sudden, I realized that I still have the ball, but I'm not sure which one it is because I got a lot of souvenir baseballs. But it would have been nice to have International League if I could still see it. And
Right.
I think Shaughnessy was the commissioner. President.
So can you remember, I'm a guy who never got to go to Maple Leaf Stadium. I've seen photos and some footage, and it looks really cool. Like,
terrific ball.
Tell me what you can about Maple Leaf Stadium, and then you got to see Sparky Anderson there, right? Because he was managing the Leafs.
Yeah, and I got to know him too. It was like what you expect, what the romantic picture of a ballpark. The closest I've seen since, like, since Toronto had a major league teams, I went to the Dominican, and I went to a stadium there that was very much like it. It was short down the right field line, but it was 425 feet to center field.
Wow.
But Rocky Nelson, who was the first baseman, he'd been with the Montreal Royals before that, and so had Sparky, actually. But he had that nice little pull swing, lefty, and he popped a lot of home runs over that short porch there.
I'll bet.
And it was a really classic stadium. And when it was built, it was considered, I think, state of the art. In the 1920s, it was. It's what older people like me envision a baseball park as being. Not so much. It's like fancy bars. Well, we have fancy ballparks now. And I know you need it, but this is what a real ballpark looked like. But that 25 foot to center field. And I remember, was it Mac Jones? They're playing in the Little World Series. I'd never seen a ball hit that hard. It was a line drive. It went right off the center field wall, and he got inside the park home run. But I've never seen anybody be able to hit. You wouldn't believe the line drive it was. Like it wasn't, there was no arc to it at all. It didn't seem like, it just kept, obviously it didn't keep rising,
like a
but it
frozen
seemed
rope?
like it, yeah. And they had a center fielder in that same year, 1960, I believe, Jackie Waters, who was just a tremendous defensive center fielder. And I remember once he ran in a ball, caught it, and kept running, stepped on second base and got a double play because the guy had thought for sure it was going to drop in, and he was straight far from it. Sparky, I remember it might have been his last game. I remember he took a dive for a ball when he was playing second base and injured his shoulder. And then he became manager maybe the next year. And I remember one game of the doubleheader after the first game coming out, he took the lineup for the second game, and I remember he just kicked dirt all over the home plate because he was rather annoyed with the call that had gone against him in the first game. And of course, so he was thrown out.
Did Sparky always have white hair? I need to know.
Yes. It seemed like, if I remember right, it was always, yeah.
He was like, forever, sort of like a Steve Martin type
What a
thing.
great guy. I mean, I remember when I was at Ryerson, I did a lot of stuff for CJRT, which was the station there, still FM station. And we brought him in for an interview, and he was terrific. And then I went to Maple Leaf Stadium to go through their clippings because I was doing some sort of story. I'm still a student.
Okay.
And I know Sparky was in the next office to me, and I could hear him selling seasons tickets and stuff like that.
Wow.
But you knew the way it was going, that 60 team won by 17 games. They won the pennant by 17 games. They won the International League playoffs, but then they lost in the Little World Series, they called it, or whatever, Junior World Series.
World Series.
But from that time on, the attendance kind of seemed, it dwindled, I don't know whether people lost interest because they just ran going away, Mel McGahey was the manager of that team, and he went on to manage the Cleveland Indians. And it was... So I have a lot of memories from that place. Taking my father there on Father's Day was good. That was a nice memory.
Nice.
And actually being able to pay for it. And also I was able to get free tickets at times from, I knew somebody who knew some of the Bison's players. So I would get tickets and sit with their families because being close, their families. They have quite a few people from Buffalo who would be there. So that was when I was about 16, and so I've seen numerous games there. I love that place, and even when I was studying for exams,
yeah,
I used to live in East York, and I used to take the Bloor streetcar to Bathurst and the Bathurst streetcar down. But even when I was studying for exams, I'd read it on the streetcar. And then, because it was a fairly long ride, and then, sometimes between innings I'd crack the book open again. But I always found a baseball park a restful place. I don't feel, now that I'm working at one, I don't feel that it's work. And I always found a baseball park somehow comforting.
Beautiful. I often wish I could go to Maple Leaf Stadium. It kind of ticks me off a little that they blew this thing up.
Yeah, I have a picture of myself. I can't find it, but I will one day. I saw it a couple of years ago. A picture of myself, and when I was at the Toronto Telegram, they took a little desk for me and a typewriter, and we put it at the old home plate. This is after they destroyed had flattened the place, and so there I am. I got a picture of me sitting at home plate at my typewriter.
And I mean, so you mentioned you were, born in the 40s, but when this team was birthed before. This is back when it was the Toronto St. Patrick's, right? So before the hockey team was called the Maple Leafs. So there was a Toronto Maple Leaf baseball team before there was a hockey team.
Yeah, that's right. I believe that's right. Yeah.
I think a few years prior. I think when I do my research here. Is it true that you interviewed Casey Stengel?
Yes, and Yogi Berra.
Okay, I got to hear this story. Give me this story here.
There's not much of a story, but I was working for the Hamilton Spectator, and I got an old friend of mine, Dan Proudfoot. We roomed together, so I was supposed to cover a baseball game that weekend. It was either Inter-County League or Halton County League, one or the other. And I got Dan to cover for me, and I said, I'm going to go to New York, and I'm going to go see the Mets.
Right.
And I'd done it before, actually, but this time I decided that I'd like to talk to Casey Stengel about a prospect named Dennis Ryband, who is a Canadian.
Okay.
And so I ended up getting a media credential for one game. And here I was chatting up with a couple of other players, and then I see Casey, and I went over to him and asked him about Dennis Ryband, and he says, I think you better ask our minor league people about that. Real great interview. Man, we chatted a little bit. And then I saw Yogi, and we talked a little bit, and Yogi says, I said, yeah, I came down by train. He says, well, next time, kid, why don't you try the plane? It's a lot quicker. The wisdom of Yogi, right?
I like it. What's his line? He goes, that place, it's too busy. No one goes there anymore.
Oh, yeah. Or how about the pizza? You want it better, just better cut it in half. I don't think I can eat 8 pieces.
Oh, they're too good to be true. Oh my goodness. Okay. It's deja vu all over again. Now, this Hamilton Spectator gig that brought you to New York there, is that your first newspaper job?
Yeah, I went to Hamilton Spectator as a summer student. Then and twice, and then they couldn't get a full-time position for me after I graduated, so I went to the St. Catharines Standard, and I was there until I saved up too much money and really wanted to get back to Toronto. So in '66, I quit. I did a lot of courts. I really liked St. Catharines. I didn't do sports at all on St. Catharines.
Okay.
But I knew Jack Gatecliffe, the sports editor, a great guy. But I did a lot of courts and managed to get a lot of people mad at me because I wrote stories about like these rich people with their yachts and stuff like that, you know. And I thought I put a humorous twist on them because, you know, these people getting fined in court was kind of neat. And I don't think anybody else had reported on things like that when they covered the courts, because I was told by another reporter, says, I talked to so-and-so at this cocktail party, and they said they're going to sue you. And there was nothing wrong with what I wrote. You know, it was all factual. It's just magistrate's court, right? So I got kind of restless. I wanted to go back to Toronto, and so I did. I became a racetrack bum, which I always wanted to do for about three months.
Okay, but pause right there, Larry, because
Yes.
Garnett Barnsdale, he's a good FOTM. That means friend of Toronto Mike. And Larry, you're now an FOTM as well, friend of Toronto Mike.
Okay.
So that you can put that beside your Jack Graney Award. By the way, what is a Jack Graney Award? Is it a medal? Is it a certificate? Is it a trophy?
It's kind of like a silver plate kind of thing.
That's not bad. I think it's
Yeah,
classy.
it was nice. I had it done at Olympic Stadium. I got my presentation rather than in Toronto because, you know, when the Blue Jays played the who were they playing? Anyway, they would play exhibition games there.
Yeah, that was
And
called what was that called? Not the Prentice Cup. That's
No, the Pearson Cup. No,
Pearson
that wasn't
Cup.
the Pearson Cup. Well,
Not
I guess
the
I don't know if they
I
still
think they
called
it that for many
It
years.
was the Pearson Cup.
Okay.
Yeah. And you know, we used to trap the baseball players by asking them, you know who Pearson is? And they didn't. And then Buck Martinez, when he was still playing, he got wise to it, and he would warn them all the next year. You know, listen, they're going to ask you, and he was, you know.
Buck blew it. Okay. All right. So we. I was in the middle of taking you somewhere here. So this is from Garnett Barnsdale. He wrote, I'm pretty sure Larry covered horse racing and was the paper's handicapper.
Yes.
I am interested in that part of his career and if he still has an interest in that sport. So let's make Garnett happy. He's a huge horse racing fanatic. So talk about the horse racing part of your life. And I just want to let all the Blue Jay fans listening know that I have many Blue Jay questions and it's coming soon. Okay, go ahead, Larry.
All right. I started covering horse racing. First of all, standardbred racing for the Tally, and then I did thoroughbred racing, and then I did a combined. I did both of them for the Tally, and then the Tally folded in '71 November, and after a while at the Globe, they put me on the horse racing beat again. Again, I did both, and it's a beat I really enjoyed because I enjoyed the backstretch and meeting the grooms, the trainers, especially the trainers that a lot of people didn't know really well. There's just a lot of really good stories there and just good people to talk to and people who really love their horse. I know it's a gambling, it's a business, it's a big dollar business, and it's you know, but I found that the people who look after the horses genuinely love them, you know?
Right.
And I feel they're kind of underpaid, you know. It's like a lot of people who do those jobs, but they're so important, you know. And I used to get to know the exercise riders. So I used to cover the races, except for the big stakes races. I used to try to cover it from the backstretch and get stories like that. And so just as my way of getting back at all the pageantry of the Queen's Plate, for 2 or 3 years running there, I did a story, and the main story going into the Queen's Plate would have been about all the grooms of each. I do a little thumbnail or as part of a feature of each of the grooms of each of the horses in the Queen's Plate. And it was good because they all had good stories. And, I used to go to have a few beers with them. They're the people, you get the real stuff from them anyway. Once, another time, I do the same with the standardbreds. And there's a guy named Shaky Louie. He used to look after a trotter, Grandpa Jim. And he was a character. He's a Canadian. And another time, I got to know another groom. I can't remember his name now, but he looked after a mare trotter named Delmonica Hanover. And he said, "Would you like to jog her one day?" This is at Greenwood.
Right.
And she's getting ready for the Maple Leaf Trotting Classic. And I said, "Sure." So I got there one morning. I had to go to Fort Erie to do the thoroughbreds that afternoon, but I went there early in the morning. So I got to do a lap with Delmonica Hanover.
Okay.
And, now this is the story. And the one thing is you don't realize I didn't have goggles on. I just had my glasses. And you wouldn't believe that what comes back from a horse sticks on your glasses like for a long time. I'm talking like days, maybe even weeks. But the shame of it all is that in the race, the big Maple Leaf Trotting Classic, she broke stride, which she never did, And I kind of felt weird. I wonder if it's just because having strange hands holding the reins that one day kind of throw her. Yeah, who knows? And luckily, I felt vindicated 2 weeks later or a week later when she won the Roosevelt International Trot, which is like the World Championship of trotting horses. They bring them all over from all over the world. She was one great mare. One of my favorite. Her and another one was Fresh Yankee, who is driven by Joe O'Brien. And Joe was such a great driver, and trainer. And, he's a Hall of Famer. He's from the Maritimes. So then there's the other part of it was, so I got to the point where I'd rather talk to those people than the big names. Although in harness racing, the guys are so good, even like great names like Billy Houghton and they were always really good, and you could call them up if you needed something. Then I also got to cover. I covered the Roosevelt International once when I was at the Telegram, and Fresh Yankee had not won. She'd been closed for a couple of years, and I was haggling with them to let me go cover it. And Doug Creighton, the managing editor, wasn't so sure, and I said, "Look, give me an advance for $100. I'll put it on her. That's how confident I am she's going to win. And that'll pay for my expenses." He says, "No, you don't have to do that. We'll send you." And anyway, she won the race. And, I had a few dollars. I'm not a big bettor, but I did have a few dollars on her. That was a big thrill just to see them. You have to remember in those days it was kind of, the international aspect of it was really important in horse racing. It was because it was just, you didn't get that in the thoroughbreds so much, So then I got to cover a lot of big thoroughbred races besides the local ones. I did my first Derby, Kentucky Derby in 1976. I did 77. I got to cover Seattle Slew's Triple Crown.
Woo!
And I covered all the races. And in 1978, lo and behold, another Triple Crown with Firmed. I had one of the greatest duels with him and Aladar. And that Belmont Stakes is one of the best races I've ever seen live. And I got to just think they hadn't had a Triple Crown for like 25 years or something.
And
I could cover them back to back. And we almost had another one with Spectacular Bid a couple of years later. And
wow,
I remember Buddy Delp was a trainer. We used to call him Spectacular Bud. And he was really against from Maryland, he was really against the New York press. So once again, I am a backstretch person, right?
Right.
So when Spectacular Bid wins, and he wasn't going to talk to the New York press, so or the general press, media. Because he has this resentment against New York press. So as soon as he won, I hightailed it to the backstretch at Churchill Downs, went right to the barn. And there comes Buddy. And I'm sitting there. He says, I'm not going to talk to those guys. I'm not going to talk to those guys. And I'm saying, yeah, don't do it. Don't do it to myself.
Right.
Stay here. Give me the story. So finally he got talked into going to the press conference and all that. But I tried.
Remind me, what year does Greenwood shut down?
I can't remember now.
Early 90s though, right?
Yeah.
Early 90s.
And I spent a lot of time there.
I'll bet. Hey, did you ever? I'm going to shout out my friend and my client. I proudly produce Down the Stretch, which is the definitive Ontario horse racing podcast. And I just want to shout out FOTM Hall of Famer Peter Gross.
I know Peter.
So,
hello, Peter.
Any good Peter Gross stories?
No. Can I tell you a story about one of my great triumphs of the Kentucky Derby?
Yeah, of course.
Well, Philly hadn't won it forever, right? Since about 1915. And I'm looking at this filly, Genuine Risk, who didn't look like a filly, you know. She looked like a filly, you know. She was a very strong horse. And she was really doing well. And Dave Stevenson, who had been director of racing at the Ontario Jockey Club, had gone on to New York. He was, but I saw him at the Derby. He says, "Take a look at this filly. She is really training well." I have to give him some credit here. And Leroy Jolly was a trainer. He did not want to enter her. He wanted to enter her in the Kentucky Oaks, right? But the owners, the Firestones, they wanted to put her in the Derby. And I got to know the exercise rider pretty well. So after conversing with those people, I put her on top. I think the headline was, "The filly is a genuine risk."
Right.
She won and paid like $28. A friend of mine said he had a bookie who took $6 bets on that Derby, and 5 of them were on genuine risk. He was not happy with me. So, but I was happy. And then another thrill, as far as betting goes, I mean, would have been covering Sonny's Halo winning the Kentucky Derby in '83. And I had so much money from home, and I had to do the expos after that. So my wallet was so big I could barely get it in my pocket because of all the money I cashed. And not a lot of it was mine. But every time I'd phone home, like you phone the office, somebody else would wanted me to put another bet on Sonny's Halo. But that was... God, how much money? Anyway, it was a lot. But it was kind of nervous, though, because here I am going to St. Louis covering the Expo series, right? And you know, I wanted to go to East St. Louis for the all-night bars, and I got this wad in my hand. I kind of nervous.
A lot of cash.
Pops, we may doze, but we never close. 24. In East St. Louis, they have a 24-hour bar there. There's nothing like being after a World Series in 1982 and being in Pops at 7 a.m. and they're cleaning the place out.
Wow.
They said, "We better get home, Bill." That was Bill Lever, who was at the Sun. "We better get home, Bill, because they're going to have a parade. You might get caught in the traffic."
Man, you've covered some events here. Okay, so let's get some nuts and bolts taken care of. Firstly, you mentioned the expos there.
Yeah.
You covered the expos at Jari Park.
I did.
Okay, tell me a little bit about that. Another stadium I'll never
Great
get
park.
to.
Well, it was good. I covered. Let's see. I covered the last series of the season of their first season, '69, and Kurt Flood was playing for the Cardinals, and unfortunately he didn't play. I think he might have played just a couple of innings, if at all, because he was injured, right? And that was memorable for that. But it was also, I loved the crowd there. It was really, it's only I think a Montreal crowd can be compared to Toronto. There's a certain joy, you know, and it's the end of the first season, and
yeah.
And, it was just a lot of fun there. Gene Mock was a bit of a sourpuss, but that's okay. I mean, he always was. I tried to talk to him a little bit, but he I guess I got there kind of late for his post-mortem on the season, right? And I guess with him, I think he knew he was getting into. But the thing is, I don't care if you expect it. Losing for these guys is difficult, right?
Right.
And John Robertson was there in Montreal. Was one of the funniest people I've ever met, and great writer. And he later came to Toronto. I just like the atmosphere of the place, and I did cover other games at Jerry Park, like say opening days and stuff like that. And I covered them a lot more when they were in Olympic Stadium, which was routinely voted by when the players. New York Times used to do a players poll. It was routinely voted as the worst baseball park, going.
Somehow beating out Exhibition Stadium.
They had some. Yeah, but Exhibition Stadium was quirky. I liked it.
Okay.
I know. I mean, well, it's not a baseball
you're talking.
park.
Yeah, I loved it because that's where my Blue Jays played.
The desk would always. I was referred to the confounds of Exhibition Stadium, and they'd always change it to the confines. And I'd say no, confounds because of the way the ball would bounce, the terrible turf.
And confines is Wrigley Field. You can't.
I know that.
You can't take that.
You can't. You can't argue with desk guys. Sometimes they have the last say, right?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I got to get you covering the Jays, but firstly, you mentioned that you were at the Toronto Telegram, and then the Telegram is shuttered in 1971.
Yeah.
And is that the same year you joined the Globe and Mail? 1971.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay,
I took a little holiday and went to the racetrack and stuff like that, Aqueduct and Garden City, and came back, and the first assignment for the Globe and Mail was Chinese ping pong players were visiting Toronto.
Okay. Okay. Now table tennis, right? We don't
I call it ping pong, right. Table tennis, whatever you want to call it. It's okay with me.
That's quite the first venture there. Okay, so this is 1971. Obviously, there's no Blue Jays yet. But,
November, and I was on the desk, and John Bassett had closed the paper, and he also owned the Argos, right? And I used to cover quite a bit of Argos stuff, so I got. I'm on the desk when the Argos lost the Grey Cup, and I was probably pretty happy about that, just because of what had happened. It's kind of tough when you got a 3-year-old daughter and you don't have a job.
Well, yeah,
and
it's karma, right?
It was the second time that it's happened to me. So,
but you get a job so quickly, like that's relatively short. So how do you get the gig? You're Larry. Come on over. Like how?
Yeah, basically they called me up. Yeah, I could have gone to the Montreal Star too.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you think about?
And I could have gone to the Toronto. Actually,
but you wanted to stay here. You're a Toronto guy.
Well, I could have gone to the Toronto Sun. I was going to be their first hockey writer.
Wow.
And because George Gross and Doug Creighton, they asked me, and I said, sure. I took it. Okay. But what happened was, the Globe also called, and Doug Creighton said to me, he said, our financing has fallen through, so if you get into the job, you might as well don't turn it down, because there's nothing certain with this new paper we're trying to start.
Right.
So I went to the Globe and did an interview with Clark Davey, the managing editor, and I said, okay, and I got offered a job, but I said, I waffled, and I said, I'm going to have to, can I get back to you on that, right? And I'll get back to you, kind of thing. I don't like to do that, but then, because I was still having hopes that I could work with, because Doug Creighton's one of the best bosses you'd ever have. And Gross was a lot of fun. And so I had to make a decision, right? And when Doug came up to me and said that we've got the financing game, we're on, but by then I'd said I had to tell the Globe that I had them. And in between that, I got a call from Dennis Harvey. He used to work for him at The Spectator. He called me up and said, look, don't go to that new tabloid. He said, it's not going to work. And he says, you can come here, because there was Rick Matsumoto, I think a couple other people, Bob Johns, they went to the Montreal Star.
Oh, the Star.
Yeah. The old Montreal Star.
Right.
That's what it's called.
Well, yes, it's important youngsters realize that the Sun, the little paper that grew, like it was no sure thing when it was.
No, it wasn't. It was uncertain, and if I didn't have a family, I would have gladly have taken the chance. But my good friend, as it turned out, Eaton Howitt, became the hockey writer, which is good. I was glad that that at least he got it. And then John Iaboni, another friend, who he also did a lot of hockey. Did a very good job for them.
Now, go ahead. Sorry, Larry.
And the thing is that the Sun, that they really developed a strong sports section, And at the Globe, we had a good sports. We had at one time had a great sports section, but as years went on, they kind of de-emphasized it more.
Funnily enough, we'll talk more about these Globe sports writers, but funnily enough, just today I confirmed the return of Stephen Brunt to Toronto Mic'd. So listeners will be interested. In late May, Stephen Brunt back in studio for his third visit, but his first since leaving Sportsnet. So that's happening. So tune in for that.
I work with Stephen.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's Globe and Mail triggered the memory there, but any Stephen Brunt stories while I drop his name?
No, I think most of the stories are about me.
What about David Schultz?
We used to go to the World Series and all that, but those guys always went home early. I didn't go home early.
What about David Schultz? He wouldn't go home early. Do you have any David Schultz stories? Only because he's here tomorrow.
With David, I didn't really cover a lot of things with him. More in the office. He was to hockey, and I was into baseball.
Right.
David, he was on the desk when he first got there, and so I got to know him. Then I remember. With the usual desk reporter exchanges. Yeah, nothing spectacular there.
Okay, so once I get you assigned as the Blue Jays beat writer, it's going to be a lot of Blue Jays the rest of the way. So before I get you assigned as the Blue Jays beat writer, which I believe happens in 1980, Olympics. How many Olympics did you cover?
Just the one.
Okay, which one?
84.
Oh, that's the boycott Olympics.
Yeah.
So I was fooled by that because I was very young and Canada was dominating and I was like, we're like world beaters. And then it was like, oh yeah, but these particular countries weren't there. So
that was a great Olympics. I lucked into a lot of really good stories because nobody knew, because of the boycott, nobody knew who the real favorites were, and so I remember Jim Christie and those guys, like I was kind of the last guy. And so they made out the assignments, and they tried to go. Obviously, the columnists and the guy who was the regular Olympic reporter. They tried to go to the spots where they were going to get the medals. Right.
Right.
It turned out it didn't work out that way. But they sent me, I remember, to the cycling, and because the women were supposed to win a medal at least, and they were favorites. But they didn't. They didn't get to the podium, but. That's on that same card. The next race was the Steve Bauer one where he just missed a gold medal by a nose. So that turned out to be a great story, because that was totally unexpected. I got to a few others like that, and I had a lot of fun with that because I wasn't like the main guy. I did a lot of offbeat features and stuff like that, and I would stumble into stories where a Canadian would win a medal. I ended up being the Lake Casitas expert. That's where they held the rowing, and the Canadians did well. The Canadian women cleaned up, and so did the men. Was it the Eights or something? And then there was twins on that team, and I'm still not sure yet if I was quoting the right twin. And I remember once there was the bus to Lake Casitas, and the rowing. Those events were held early.
Right.
So it's 4 a.m. I didn't bother going to sleep one night. So I hung out in the press room there at the press center. I remember had a few beers with a guy from New Zealand who was a hoot. And so now it's 4. I'm going to get that early bus. So it's 4 o'clock or something like that, or 5 o'clock in the morning, whatever. And there was this other guy had taken a snooze on the lawn there. He was waiting for the bus too. But all of a sudden the sprinkler system went off. The poor guy jumped up, and he's got his notes in that, and they're all soaked and everything. Oh, the poor guy. I felt for him.
Oh, okay. So now it's time to learn who was I don't even know the answer to this. Who was the Blue Jay beat writer before you? Because the Jays started in 1977.
Yeah, Paul Patton and Neil Campbell. It was the real Neil. Like another Neil Campbell we had that was Neil A. Campbell, who was younger. He came on the Blue Jay beat later.
Right.
But Paul Patton and Neil Campbell, and then Jim Golla was on there. He took over from Neil Campbell, and then Patton got in, I think, a car accident or something, like got injured, and I was covering a tennis tournament, and Cease Jennings, the sports editor, called me up at the tournament and says, "Look, I got an offer. I hope you can't refuse." He said, "We need somebody to go down to spring training." And I was a baseball fan, but, had been away from outside of, the experiences with the Expos, hadn't done all that much actual covering it. So I took it and went down there for my first spring training. And naturally, I found my way to the racetrack a few times, too, because there was a trainer from Woodbine. There's a lot of trainers, they would, at Tampa Bay Downs, that had a nice deep track, so it legged up the horses well, for the regular season in Ontario. And Donnie Campbell and I used to get together quite a few times when he's down there. He was a very good trainer. And that was Steinbrenner's track.
Okay.
But that was the first spring training. So I think I did about the first 2 weeks. I did it right up until there were games, and then I had to go home.
But, okay, so this is, again, we're in 1980 here. Is that where we're at? Okay, so we're going to talk to you about these many, many years you cover the Blue Jays for the Globe and Mail, but I'm going to just give you a couple of gifts here real quick here before I get too far beyond. Okay, so firstly, Larry, do you like Italian food?
Sure.
I have a frozen meat lasagna for you in my freezer upstairs, courtesy of Palma Pasta, and this is delicious, man. I'm telling you,
okay,
delicious. Delicious lasagna. You're going to absolutely love it. So thank you to palmapasta.com. Everybody should go to palmapasta.com. Get your Italian food there. They have locations in Mississauga and Oakville. So you've got your Great Lakes. You got your Palma Pasta. This is the first time I've been able to do this in a few months here, so I'm excited, Larry. You came at the right time. But this is a Bluetooth speaker, courtesy of Moneris, because they just launched season 4 of their award-winning podcast, Yes, We Are Open, hosted by FOTM Al Grego. So you can listen to Yes, We Are Open, Larry, on your new speaker.
Okay, thank you.
You're doing well, Larry. We're not even done here. I feel like I'm Monty Hall, but I will have Al Grego back in studio soon, and we'll talk more about these inspiring stories, because he's been talking to small business owners about how they persevered. And honestly, I'm a small business owner, so it's super inspiring to me, and it will be to you too. So subscribe to the Yes, We Are Open podcast from Moneris. Again, award-winning. I can't say that about my show. What's going on there? Okay. I also have a measuring tape courtesy of Ridley Funeral Home. Larry, you never know when you need to measure something, buddy.
Absolutely.
Never know.
Tape measure home run.
Right. That's right. Tape measure home run always comes back to baseball. So shout out to Ridley Funeral Home, and we're introducing a new sponsor to the program this month. So I got to introduce them during the Mo Berg episode yesterday, but the Moment Lab, brand marketing and strategy and PR. I mean, you guys, if you're looking to help your brand, Larry, here, now that you're not with the Globe anymore, it sounds like you're still very, very active. But if you want to get your message out to the world, if you're looking to increase your brand's visibility and reach your target audience, the Moment Lab specializes in public relations. They have a team of experienced professionals who know how to craft stories and resonate with your audience and generate positive media coverage. You know all about media coverage, Larry. So contact my friends Matt and Jared at the Moment Lab. I can introduce you, and you can learn more about how they can help you achieve your public relations goals. Okay, Blue Jays baseball. Man. First question, I got many, many questions. Many are from me, but some come from FOTMs like Hebsy. Hebsy wants me to ask you, Larry, what's the best road city when you're covering the Blue Jays on the road?
I like them all.
There's got to be one.
There's always something good in every city. Like Milwaukee might be, for instance, considered a dull city, but it's great for neighborhood bars. And I can remember Allison Gordon and myself and Bill Lever playing with a bartender. We played this dice game for rounds, stuff like that. But I would say Boston, because I love Fenway Park. And also my cousin, my late cousin, he was director of histology at the Forsyth Dental Center, which is which is Harvard University.
Okay.
And so I get to visit him. So I always got all the Boston trips. Okay, I hugged them, and I so I could visit him. And there's a story with him, if you don't mind me telling it.
I don't mind, of course. This is your life, Larry.
This
Let's
is my
hear it.
first game. My second year of I guess it was Pee Wee baseball in East York at Cedarville Park. It's called Wadlow Park now, where Rob and Rich Butler also played.
Of course.
My first game was against a team that he coached. He was about 10 years older than me, maybe. And very first at bat, I hit a 2-run home run. I batted second.
Wow.
Leadoff guy, Roy Appleton, classmate of mine. He got on base, and I hit an opposite field home run, and it wasn't a cheapie.
Okay.
And I had a really, really good game. Now, this is where my cousin John psyched me out. It was a high-scoring game. I was on base the whole game, every time, one way or another. I don't know if I hit for the cycle or not, but I had a lot of hits, 4 or 5, whatever. So I come up, and it's the last inning.
Yeah.
And we got runners in scoring position, 2 out. And my cousin John yells out, "Okay, here's the guy we got to get. Here's the big guy." And psychs me right out. So what did I do? With a clutch situation, I took a fastball right down the plate for a called strike 3. And you know what? He knew how to psych me out. You know what I mean?
In your head.
He got in my head.
Oh,
and so that was, but anyway, and we lost the game.
Oh, Larry. Okay, well, you can't win them all. You can't win them all here. All right.
And I want to tell you, with the same team,
you
should know that John Hiller was one of our pitchers.
Oh, Tiger pitcher.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's in the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, man.
Yeah.
He was one of my classmates, too.
Okay. What a stacked team.
We, it's a story here, like we were in the class, but he wasn't our starting pitcher. One of my neighbors, Ray Carter, was a starting pitcher because John had a paper route. He had a star paper route.
Okay.
He had the late papers. And so our whole strategy was, hold him, Ray. Hold on until John gets here.
Wow.
Because not only was he our best pitcher, obviously,
Sure.
he was our best hitter, right? He could crank a ball.
Hey, let me ask you a John question. Didn't he have like in his 20s, he had a heart attack?
He did, yes, when he was with the Tigers and came back.
He came back, right.
And he had one of the greatest seasons of a reliever ever had. You don't have the stats on the top of my head.
And he's a Toronto guy, East York guy.
From East York. They always say he's from Scarborough because after grade 6, I think it was, either 6 or 7, his family moved to Scarborough. But I can remember sitting there at shortstop, and all of a sudden I'd see John and his bicycle with the empty, basket out front because he'd gotten rid of all his papers.
Right.
And here he was. So we knew we had some hope.
That's a great story. And you're in Etobicoke right now, home of the greatest Canadian baseball player of all time. And there's a question coming up later about him. And then I have a little story about his mom. Okay, hold on to that. Dave Steeb. I do host a sports podcast, and we record every Friday morning. It's me and Mark Hebsher. It's called Hebsy on Sports. And so I love talking about these 80s Jays, right? Because it's like those were my teams. That 85 team was my ride or die team. I loved it. Listened to every game, watched when I could. But was Dave Steeb as difficult to deal with, you as a member of the press, as a legend has it?
Yeah, sometimes he was, but the thing is, you could wait him out. And especially if an afternoon game, you could wait him out because we had the time, because of deadlines. At night, it's a little harder. But I will say that he always gave some of the best stuff because he always gave pretty honest answers.
Which is great for a journalist.
Yeah, and he would say things like, we asked him about the home run ball, and that he gave up, and he said, he said, I threw a slider to make him look bad, so I wanted to make a slider. I wanted to throw it even a better one. And, of course, it flattened out, and it's like a bad fastball, right? When the guy hits it out.
Right.
No, he would give some good answers. He was difficult, but...
Because he was super competitive. Was that part of the...
I think so. Yeah. And everybody's different. He has his personality, and maybe... you just have to learn how to deal with people. That's all.
I just can't believe he was an outfielder.
Started out when they signed his, they had to play him in outfield because his mother said he's going to be an all-star outfielder. He was a center fielder. Yeah, Bobby Maddock and Al Lamakia scouted him, and each one takes credit for him. But they saw his future as being a pitcher. He would come in and pitch, and but they humored him. They let him show to himself that he couldn't hit at the professional level.
It's wild to me. It's also, it kind of reminds me of how, although much more impressive than this, but when Wendell Clark was drafted as a defenseman, right, and became one of the great left wingers in Maple Leaf history. So, of course, there's a low bar for that. Okay, so Dave Stieb, man, in your opinion, having watched the bulk of his prime, should he be in the Hall of Fame?
Maybe by today's standard, yes, but when he was up for voting, it was things like 300 wins were important and all that.
He played on some bad teams.
And he really probably would have had but wins aren't as important now. People look at other things now, and obviously the way the game has changed, you don't get as many 20-win pitchers. He never won 20, but that wasn't his fault.
Right.
I think he's the best Blue Jay pitcher I've seen.
Better than Roy Halladay.
Yeah, it's you could make an argument for both. I mean, I always, I guess you could say, you can make a case for both of them as being the best. But I just think that Steve, when he was on, we just expected him to go the distance, and he was so nasty. His slider was so nasty, and I remember Buck Martinez would get mad at him at the times because he didn't use his fastball enough. And the other thing, he did have a lot of hard luck. And, And the thing is that people were starting to think that it was just whining, by him or on his behalf. So this is the days before computers, so you had to do a little work. So I went back and I analyzed all his starts, right? And it turns out he did pitch in bad luck. If it wasn't blue pits, it was, feeling things or, various things that went wrong, or the bullpen giving it up. So I went through all this, and I went to Buck. He was still catching, and I said, you know what? Steve's right. He's right. He is pitching in hard luck. And Buck says, please don't show it to him. Please don't show it to him, because just what he needed is confirmation,
Well, I know he eventually in Cleveland, he finally gets his no-hitter. But how many, you were there at the...
Yeah, and I was also there at the two near misses.
Yeah, I was going to say...
The one that bounced over Manny Lee's head, and then the one where Fred McGriff couldn't quite get to a ball in the ninth inning. Yeah.
I'm so glad he got one, just because to be that close and have those circumstances rob you of your no.
We were all worried because Junior Felix was under the ball for the last out. Okay, when he drops it, they're going to call an error a hit. But he caught it. He caught it.
Famously, his book, of course, was Tomorrow I'll Be Perfect. Well, it wasn't a perfect game, but it was a no-hitter.
No, that was probably... he walked a few people in that game, but it probably wasn't... I think he's pitched one hitters where he pitched better,
Right.
So, but it was really good to see him get that.
All right, Dave Stieb, love it. Now, would you take a moment and talk? I'm actually wearing a faux retro George Bell jersey, and George Bell was my guy. In fact, this is my opportunity to play this for us all.
Hi, I'm George Bell. You listen to Toronto Mike.
Little promo. Thank you, George Bell. Can you just tell us a little bit about that outfield? Shaker, Lloyd Mosby in center, and of course, George Bell in left, and Jesse Barfield with the cannon for an arm in right field.
Yeah. They were good. They were, I don't know if they're the best outfield in baseball, but when they were coming up, they were called the best young outfield in baseball.
And they're all like this identical age, like 2 weeks apart or something.
And it was... They were good. I don't. Jesse was just an incredible arm, and it helped being an exhibition stadium. I mean, the artificial turf, the ball gets to him quicker. It was short. It was shorter than the dimensions said. There was a mistake made. It was probably about 3 or 4 feet shorter than the whatever
what was on the wall.
What was it that was on the wall, because there was a mistake. Put the fence on the wrong side of the flagpole.
Oh,
and anyway, but.
That's a fun fact.
Guys went first to third and at their peril, and I've never seen a guy, with an art with the accuracy as well.
Wait, he could throw a strike. I remember I'd see him throw a strike to home plate from deep right field.
He's just really good. George, when he first started out, wasn't that bad defensively, but he became not such a good defensive player, but boy, he could hit. And I remember his first, very seldom do you see, Jose Bautista did the same thing. Very often you don't see a guy have a really hot spring training where it's 400, and then they just keep hitting the same way when the season starts. But George Bell did that his first year. And man, he was, I love that guy because he was a team player. I know he had a bad rep with some people, and
Kiss
he was
my purple ass?
Yeah, that's what he said. And the Globe and Mail published that, not purple butt.
And I know it's ass because I've had enough of you scribes on to confirm it. But yeah, it was always reported to young Mike that it was purple butt. And
the Globe, we had it down as purple ass. Okay. And so the thing is that I think Beeston will tell you this too, that he felt that between him and maybe Todd Stoudemire, they're the two guys of Beeston's era there who really, really cared about the Blue Jays. George, I remember when Buck Martinez dislocated his ankle and broke his leg in Seattle.
Right.
And George was the first guy over to help him, In fact, he was too enthusiastic in helping. And Buck says, "You're hurting me," when he's carrying the stretcher,
And this is when he throws the guy out, right?
Yeah, that was the greatest play.
Yeah. Wow.
Throw two guys out at the plate.
Wow.
He got the first guy, Phil Bradley, knocked him over. That's when he was injured, and he's on the ground. And Gorman Thomas, an old friend of Buck's with the Brewers, wasn't gonna. He just kind of went softly into home plate, and Buck was able to tag him. But what had happened is Buck's on his back, and Gorman's going to third base, and Buck throws to third, and it goes wild, obviously, because he's on his back.
Right.
And George Bell, I think, got the ball and threw it in, and it was a strike. And they got him. Yeah, it's one of.
Loved
and
it.
you know what? It wasn't even the play of the week, if I remember right. Carlton Fisk tagged up two guys at home, but the Carlton Fisk swipe tags, and they made that play of the week. How could they not make
because
this
it's
one play of the
Toronto,
week?
Larry. It's Toronto.
But I was amazed by that. Carlton Fisk. Okay,
it's because it's Carlton Fisk.
I know.
You mentioned Beeston there. Do you have an email address for Paul Beeston? You have a contact info for him?
He doesn't answer his emails. So.
Only because I was with him last week, and we were the Jays season opener, and we were watching the ninth inning, Jays win, and we were together for that, and we had a really good chat. But I didn't have the courage to say, Paul, get in my basement. I got to collect these stories, and now I want to follow up with something, but I need I need an email.
I'll get it for you.
Okay, so shout out to Beeston.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so
but that getting back to that outfield,
yeah,
that
please.
was
We haven't got to Lloyd yet.
It was Lloyd. Like I like them all in their own way, different ways. Lloyd, George is funny. I got to tell this.
Yeah,
George
please
story
tell me any George Bell stories you want. Are you kidding me?
He would always say, "I'm not talking to you guys. I'm not talking to you guys." Guess who he hung out with at the hotel bar after the game? Us. He hung out with the reporters. So one day I told him, I said, "George, I've quoted you 8 times since you weren't talking to us."
Okay, so let me ask you another question here. Is it true, I believe it was Fergie Oliver used to give $50 bills to
Yes.
players? Okay.
And they take it and casually stuff it up their sleeve, kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I love those stories too. Okay, so shout out to Fergie Oliver.
But Lloyd Moseby, like, he I think he envisioned us, he thought of himself more as a basketball player. He always told me, I said, "What player would you be if you were a basketball player?" And he says, because he got his shaker nickname from basketball. He says, Norm Nixon. He was a really good guard with the Lakers. And so...
I don't think I knew this, Larry. I don't think I knew the origin of the shaker nickname.
He could shake and bake.
Okay,
apparently.
So basketball, that's where he got that nickname.
You probably never knew that Cecil Fielder was a all-star point guard in high school in basketball.
No, because he's huge. I didn't.
Yeah, we never thought of that, would you?
Okay, now listen, I'm going to jump around chronologically, but Jason Elliott did write in with a question for you, Larry. He wants to know, any explanation for how Cecil Fielder left Toronto for Japan, then Detroit, and became such an incredible hitter? He just wants to know, how do you go to Japan and then become 50 home run guy?
I don't know. I think he just got a chance to play, and don't forget he had
Fred McGriff was here.
Fred McGriff was here, and they were good friends.
Hall of Famer.
And, Cecil, I remember we had lunch together once near the end of the season.
Yeah.
And he was talking to me, and he really wanted out of Toronto because it was a dead end for him, right? And so he talked about it, and then I said to him, okay, he says, you know who I am, you know what I do. Can I write this? And he said, well, I'll tell you what. He says, you can write it when we're eliminated from the playoffs. So they weren't in the playoffs, but eliminated from contention.
Contention, right.
And so him and Fred were always playing cribbage together. So I remember when they finally were eliminated from the race, I went over to Cecil and said, okay, we can do that story now? And he says, okay. He said, wait till I'm finished playing cribbage with Fred. And, I can remember there was a competition, and when they decided that Fred would be the full-time, I think at the time, DH, ahead of Cecil, maybe 87, whatever it was. But this is how close those guys were. So when they announced that Jimmy Williams announced that Fred got the job over Cecil, I phoned up Fred in his hotel room, and Fred said, can we talk later? Can we talk some other time? And I didn't understand. I thought he was stalling, putting me off or something like that. So I said, I had no other choice. So I said, okay. What I realized didn't realize, what I found out later, is that he was playing cribbage with Cecil, and he did not want to talk about it in front of Cecil and make him feel bad, right? And it's kind of a classy act.
Sure.
And the funny thing is, they had Fred McGriff penciled in. It was the opening day, and I said to Jimmy, "Did you the starter for?" Can't remember the name of the starter, but Cecil hit 2 home runs against him last year. I said, "Do you remember how Cecil did against this guy last year?" And Jimmy. So anyway, when the lineup comes out, there's Cecil in there.
Because he didn't realize. He
forgot
Larry
or something or whatever.
No, okay, Larry. So lots of ground to cover here, but just first base alone. If I think of these four guys who kind of took over for each other, you had Willie Upshaw, Fred McGriff, Johnny Olerud, and Carlos Delgado, like back to back to back to back. That's quite the run at first base for this franchise. Yeah. That's quite the foursome there. And I mean, I think I'm of the opinion, I'm very biased opinion, that Carlos Delgado deserved a serious Hall of Fame.
I think so. I think you didn't get enough votes. I mean, obviously you didn't to survive one ballot, right? Which is surprising. I mean, he's also a Hall of Fame person, so.
Right. Right. Yes, he is.
But, and I think what we're going to see is that standards seem to be, with the Veterans Committee, the standards seem to be changing a little bit too. It used to be, it seemed like you had to hit a milestone, and stuff like that. And he never quite hit that milestone, but he was he was really, I think, deserving of it. I voted for him anyway, so.
This is Bruce Walker who sent in this question. Not Larry Walker. This is Bruce Walker.
I know Bruce.
Okay, well.
Bruce Walker from East York?
I probably, I'll ask the question. He goes, ask Larry, one hell of a journalist. That's you, by the way. Which Blue Jay player was the biggest jerk he had to contend with? Bruce Walker.
What do you think? Dave Revering.
I don't even remember Dave. I'm waiting for a name I know, Larry.
Dave Revering. Okay, well.
Remind me who Dave is.
He was with the Blue Jays, and he went on the one of the pregame shows when he was with the Blue Jays, and he thought he was too big for this expansion franchise. It was maybe Bobby Cox's first year. Okay. The team it was still fairly early in the season. They actually started getting good in the second half of the season. And Dave said that he would really like to play for a better team. Eventually, that's what he said, basically. And he topped the ball during the game. He topped the ball off like it just trickled in front of the plate kind of thing, and fell and never got up and bothered running to first base. So coupled with what he'd said, he went to Bobby Cox and said, well, what do you think of that? He says, I'll tell you one thing. He says, we'll trade. If he wants a trade, we'll give it to him. He says, what would you get back for him? He says, a used glove and a bottle of skunk oil. That'd be fine. And they had an off day, and I had the pleasure of and having dealt with him before. He was like he didn't want to be there, and he was better than everybody else. You know, I don't like to vilify a guy, but I mean, that's the impression he was. You know, that he gave us. And anyway, they brought up Adams to replace him. They did after that road trip, the day off, and so they got rid of him just like that. They just released him. So he was one of the biggest. I wonder if I can do better.
Yeah,
I get along with so many.
Well, let me do the converse here, because Rob Clark Williams wrote in, and he wanted to know who's the best player you've dealt with on the Blue Jays, and it could be a tie. But who are the solid, sweetheart, good people that you've dealt with with this franchise?
Well, Delgado's one. Mosby, Bell and Barfield. I mean, those guys. I go back to the '80s, and they were your favorite team. As far as a team to cover, they were my favorite too, because things hadn't gotten so corporate. You know, that you could actually chat with people, and you know, you could get there at 1 PM and go in and talk to a guy like Rance Mullenix about hitting for
right.
You know, and now it's like 4:00, and they go see the manager, and then the guys are getting ready to go hit, and everything's a scrum now.
There's no access anymore.
The access isn't as good, and you know, I don't know whether I'm not. We've given up a lot of access, so they would be among those. I mean, at one time, Garth Orge and Rance Mullenix were two good guys. I mean, Ernie Witt. I mean, I know I'm giving a big, long list here, but it's hard to pick out an absolute favorite. But I would say Delgado, I remember interviewing Delgado once, and he had a phone call, a message or something like that. He says, look, I've got to go answer this call. He said, so I said, that's fine. I got all I need, you know. And so I went out, and I'm on the field there near the batting cage. And, well, 15 minutes later, Carlos comes into the dugout. He says, Larry, you need anything more? You know, just
sweetheart,
being thoughtful, you know?
Yeah, I love
it. And Lloyd Mosby, I loved his sense of humor. You can tell a joke, maybe a little oblique, you know, but he'd get it, you know? Great sense of humor. And
hell of a rapper, too, by the way.
To,
Shaker had a good rap style to him, too.
Yeah.
I've heard some rap songs from Shaker. Go ahead.
And Jesse Barfield was always like kind of a sweetheart guy. George was, say, a little more...
A little prickly, right?
Hard-nosed,
Okay.
but we got along with him great. And, you know, George is one of those grumpy guys with a heart of gold. I've seen him do things for people, like away from the baseball field, just little thoughtful gestures to people who are just working-class people doing their job, say, at a hotel or something. The little things he would do, and they're the kind of things that impress you about somebody, you know?
Nice to hear that. All right, so we talked about some of the people you worked with at the Globe. Andrew Stoughton's question is, what's your weirdest Marty York story?
Oh, do we have to get into that?
Well, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. Absolutely not.
Well, weirdest one story.
No, I don't know. Of course, none of these. My goal here is not to make you uncomfortable, but you did work many years with Marty York, and the stories are kind of legendary.
The stories were okay. Well, the kind of things I would have to deal with is I used to phone Pat Gillick every day, even in the off season. Okay, and if I'd missed a couple of days, Pat would call you and say, "You haven't called me for a couple of days." You know, kind of that's the kind of thing it was. But I'd ask Pat a question sometimes and he'd say, "Okay, who is this for, you or Marty York?" Because a lot of times, because he wouldn't talk to Marty, so I would have to be the go-between, you know, to get the quotes from Gillick. And finally, Gillick didn't want to do that anymore. So, It put me in an uncomfortable position, you know.
Well, I think Andrew Stoughton just put you in an uncomfortable position by asking you for.
I don't like to talk about, colleagues too much. I don't want to sound like I'm waffling here. I am.
It's okay.
But that's the
I can
truth.
move on.
But the thing is, I don't like telling tales out of school kind of thing like that.
No worries. Let me get you back to something.
I'm sorry, Andrew. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Andrew's also an FOTM, so hello, Andrew Stoughton. I believe he's in the Peterborough area of this fine province. Jason Elliott. Again, he had a question earlier, a Cecil Fielder, but he has a second question. Since you wrote a book on the business and economic side of baseball, what's the name? Is that Ballpark Figures?
Yes.
Okay, that came out in 1987. The Blue Jays and the Business of Baseball.
Right.
So since you wrote that book, he's wondering what you think about how practical it would be for Montreal to get a Major League Baseball team again, for the return of an MLB team to Montreal.
I think that would be the important thing would be to get a stadium, and maybe they could get away with playing in an Olympic stadium for a year or two, knowing that the stadium was being built. I think that's going to would be a key. I mean, I think I'd love to see a team back in Montreal, but I think that's going to be the key into getting the type of ownership that Toronto was very lucky to have. You know, Labatt Brewery and the bank and all that involved. You know, because they had great ownership to start out with, and that was part of the story, is that they were a lot different than other owners. And I think so that would be a key for Montreal to get. You have to get solid ownership, but maybe guys who are great owners too. You know, how do you quantify that? But that's what you'd have to have. But they'd have to have a stadium. Now, I'm not so sure what the public appetite is for providing public funds for a stadium now, because there's a lot of other things
we're
that
busy
we need to spend money on. But the stadium, if they could find somebody who wants to pay for a stadium, I think they would get a team.
Well, here in Toronto, we're busy spending our public funds on private spas at Ontario Place. That we're too busy investing in such ventures. Just don't wind me up, okay, Larry?
Okay,
come on.
No, you don't want to get me going on that stuff either.
I was at Jarvis and Queens Quay today, and I was biking by Trillium Park there at Ontario Place, and I was thinking, seriously, Larry, if they mess with that. I love that site, and it belongs to the people here. If they mess with it, I'm going to chain myself to the Sinosphere, and they're going to have to bulldoze me. You want to join me, Larry?
I will.
All right, so we got you, me, and Ben Rayner.
And you know what? I when I lived before I moved I live at Christie Pitts now, right next to Christie Pitts. That's my backyard and front yard. I used to live in an apartment building. And they were bought up a whole bunch of houses across the street, and they were going to build townhouses, except for one guy. He was actually my daughter's guitar teacher.
Okay.
He was a musician. He held out. And I think when they brought the bulldozer, I think he was even out on the front lawn saying, "No way, you get my house."
That's wild.
Which is great. I mean, and they never did. That house is still there.
Love it. I just delivered something to Midtown Gord. He's at I'm going to say Christie and St. Clair, I'm going to say. And I took a Bluer to Christie and went up Christie on my bike on the weekend. Love the Christie Pits. Okay. Mike from K-Dub says, Joey Votto to Toronto to wrap up his career of the Blue Jays. He's a character guy like no other. And he says, Larry, yes or no?
Yes.
But is that less? Yes, that was Jay. Because I have some insight here. I know you're the journalist in the room, not me. Yeah. But I was recently at a dinner. I like to name drop on this show. So Donovan Bailey and I were at dinner, okay? Yeah. And the sommelier who was, helping Donovan choose his expensive wines was Joey Votto's mom.
Yeah.
This is only a few months ago, and she starts talking about how Joey just he was playing chess in the annex or whatever. Yeah. Joey had just left to go to spring training, and there was talk about how Joey Votto would absolutely love to wrap up his career of the Blue Jays, but the interest level from the Blue Jays was 0.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
So this is funny.
If Alex was here, there might be a better chance.
Right, and Alex is not here.
No,
He's busy winning World Series.
He's winning World
also.
Series. Yes.
Oh, all right. So now I'm going to hit some greatest Blue Jay hits here. Okay, and by the way, we ran through your thoroughbred part of your career, and I just want to point out that you won a Sovereign Award in '81, which I know what a Sovereign Award was because Peter Gross was nominated. In fact, has been nominated for a Sovereign Award against like these huge like I think one was like Woodbine Entertainment, and the other is some other, maybe it's TSN or something big. Like it's a huge outfit. And meanwhile, it's just Peter Gross and I, and we're like only 3 nominations or something, and we're nominated for a Sovereign Award, which we cannot win because of who we're up against. But I just wanted to point out that you did win a Sovereign Award in '81, and that's for Best Thoroughbred Racing Story of the Year. So where is that Sovereign Award right now? Do you have it?
It's a lovely trophy. Is
it on display in your home?
It's in my front room, which nobody goes into, but
the trophy
there.
room.
I remember we had a veterinarian over when I look after one of the cats, and she was a horse lover too, so she saw that and thought it was it's a really good trophy. It's one of the best you could ever get.
Okay, good. And now, because we're going to close with Jays, and again, you've been amazing. It would shock you if I told you how long we've been chatting. You've been amazing. We're going to wind down with just a few quick hits on Blue Jays because we got to get him to the World Series years. But Mike, okay, we covered him. So no, I wanted to point out something I learned when I was researching you, Larry, that when you were in Seattle on a baseball assignment in 1984, you covered the Green River murders?
Yeah.
Okay, because I happen to be a big Pearl Jam fan, and I know the guys there were in a band called Green River based on, and I do know about these Green River murders. How did you, a baseball scribe, end up covering the Green River murders in Seattle?
Well, they just asked me to do it. They needed a front page story. Anyway, it was the big story at the time, and they were coming up with bodies and stuff like that. There was a new discovery and all that, so I talked to the police. I dealt with the police, and it turned out it was interesting. And my daughter was in theater, and I remember talking to one of the police guys I talked to. His wife was a playwright. It was interesting. So we had a lot in common. So that kind of broke down some barriers. I also, dealt with one of the reporters who was covering the case. And the paper's out of business now, but the Seattle Post-Intelligencer, I think it's called, they were very helpful with me too. But anyway, that's one of those things. I've never considered myself, say, a baseball writer. I'm a sports writer, but I've also worked news.
Right.
And I never thought I was going to be a sports writer. The reason I got into sports is because Jim Proudfoot said that the Star needed a bowling columnist because their bowling columnist had Noel Bates was a law student, and he was leaving for them. So Chester says, because I was doing something else at the time, he said, if you really want to get back into newspapers, why don't you want to do that? And I said, well, he said, yeah, I would be interested. He said, well, call Milt Dunnell. Talk about legends.
Yeah.
So my knees buckled a little bit, and so I get in a payphone, and I called Milt, and he says, yeah, I'd be interested. Jim told me, and he says, yes, we need somebody. When do you want me to start? I asked him. He says, how about right now?
Wow.
So I went to the Star and wrote what it really was is best lines from the lanes, and what it was a collection of top scorers from the various leagues, right? And of course, my biggest challenge was sorting out especially early, was sorting out the difference between 5 pins and 10 pins, right? Because I was no bowler. So that's how I started, and I ended up doing a lot of freelance. I covered a lot of high school basketball and stuff like that, hockey. That's where I met Mimico, which is appropriate.
Yeah.
Mimico, I covered their team winning the
lacrosse?
The championship, basketball championship.
Oh, basketball. Okay, because Mimico
with
was a big lacrosse.
Ted Schmidt is someone I still, all these years later, Ted Schmidt, I still am in contact with him on occasion. He calls me up once in a while, or I email him or whatever. I was invited to the to the 50th, was it the 50th anniversary? Whatever it was, anniversary a few years ago. And I took pictures of Ted making the speech
Wow.
of the reunion of the team and all that, and sent them to him. So isn't that something that you can keep friendships that or
No, that's
that
beautiful.
long?
But
And he played at Christie Pitts too. He played baseball, I remember.
for the Maple Leafs?
No, he played in other leagues.
Other leagues
just
there, okay.
yeah.
But don't bury the lead here. At some point, there were so many sports writers at the Toronto Star that they had a bowling columnist.
Yeah, it was freelance. It
But
wasn't
still,
like full-time.
like
Yeah.
today
Today
they got-
you don't have that, right?
Even the Toronto Blue Jays, they have Mike Wilner's there now, and you have Gregor Chisholm. I think that might. I mean, Dave Fest. Who else is covering Blue Jays baseball? The bottom line is
Rosie DiManno, she does.
she steps in and out,
Yeah.
depending what's going on. But I've had this chat with other like Dave Perkins, for example, will tell you, when the Jays won the World Series in 1993, this is how many bodies the Toronto Stars sent to Philadelphia, and you get the number, and I can't remember the number right now, but it might be a number like 40.
Oh, it was a lot of you're including
Everything they sent,
photographers,
everyone,
news people. I remember
Right.
once they were. Somebody told me that the Star had so many people at spring training that they were one or two bodies short of qualifying to be a bureau.
Well,
Everybody wanted to go to spring training.
so that's how mighty our newspapers were at some
Yeah,
point.
but yet the coverage
pre-internet.
is a lot less now. The sports departments have shrunk.
Well, it's the advertising's gone digital, right? So
Right.
it's when everyone's putting
Yeah.
their money into Google AdWords and Facebook ads, et cetera, et cetera. There's
Yeah.
less print ads. But okay, so I do want to check. So again, I'm going to burn through a few points. One is I want to ask you about Kelly Gruber, because a few years ago, several years ago now, I suppose, Kelly Gruber was at this Pitch Talk event hosted by Ashley Docking, and by all accounts, and I've seen the footage, but Kelly Gruber appears to have had one too many wobbly pops, if you will. He might have been enjoying some alcohol, and he absolutely acted what I would describe as misogynist, particularly towards Ashley Docking.
Yeah.
And since that event, he's been persona non grata at all these Toronto Blue Jay events. So if the 1992 World Series is reuniting at the Dome, there's two people who won't be there.
Yeah.
One, of course, is Roberto Alomar,
Yeah.
who's absolutely...
Well, they had a reunion in August.
Yeah, and there was no Alomar, of
there was
course,
a lot of
but
people,
no Gruber.
But there were a lot of people who weren't there either.
Yeah, but only
But
two that were invited,
well,
I
no,
think.
that would anyway. Yeah, that
So,
doesn't surprise
I
me.
guess I'm curious, what are your thoughts on, because I don't, although we've been, it's funny, the Alomar thing, obviously they haven't told us anything except to say, trust us, you'd want him banned too, man, if
Yeah.
you knew what we knew. That's the kind of deal there. But with Kelly, so we'll put Alomar aside, they ripped his name off the level of excellence, for goodness sakes. But Kelly Gruber, I just find it interesting that, by all accounts in my research, he's not invited to these reunions, and it seems to be because of that event, that Pitch Talk event. But I'm just curious what your thoughts are on this, having known Kelly Gruber.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me. He's, what he did was, it was, you described it. I mean, that was like,
misogyny.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have no interest in seeing the guy talking to him.
Do you know, Larry, and again, I won't ask you to reveal anything out of school, but do you know anything about the Alomar situation? Or just
just what I've heard. I didn't know any, but no, that's all. I don't know any specifics. See, I'm kind of a little bit removed from that part of it because I mainly do game stories and previews now. I'm not like on a beat like I would be at a newspaper, and I don't talk to the general manager every day and stuff like that, like I used to,
So maybe on the way out here, I was going to ask you about, before I realized how we got to keep something for the sequel, but I was going to ask you about the 87 collapse, but I feel like that'll just depress all the listeners. So maybe, if you don't mind, like maybe sharing a little bit about like that moment when I guess when Timlin throws to Carter in Atlanta, and then of course, speaking of Carter, when he touches them all at the Dome in '93, just this team won it all. Something the Expos didn't do, and something the Leafs haven't done since well before I was born.
Yeah, I remember that home run. It's funny when it was going, and I didn't think I didn't realize it was going to be a home run when it first hit. I thought maybe it was going to be off the wall, and the Blue Jays would tie the game or something like that. And that's what I was thinking about. Okay, so it looks like maybe there'll be extra innings, and all of a sudden it went out, and obviously the place went nuts, and that was pure unbridled joy on Carter, the way he ran around those bases.
Absolutely.
And it was nice. It was nice for Cito Gaston, because here's a guy who had a lot of success up to that time, but didn't always get the credit, right? And anyway, that was. It's pretty hard to top that. I mean, there hasn't been another in history in a World Series of a walk-off home run that brought a team from behind. I don't think, is there, since?
No.
And so that was him. But if you want to go back to '92, another big home run for the Blue Jays was Alomar's against Eckersley.
Absolutely.
And that was a huge home run, and that kind of gets overlooked, but that was a huge one too.
And that 92, that was huge.
That made a difference, and they might not have made the '92 World Series without that.
Right.
And then you want to go to the series itself. I think Ed Sprague's pinch hit home run was big. That was a big one too.
I guess if you're doing biggest home runs in Blue Jays history, those are the big three, I would think.
Well, but Jose Bautista, the bat flip.
The bat flip. Except I always feel like you better put an asterisk next to that this team doesn't actually make the World Series. Like they go.
Oh, I see what you mean.
But whereas that Alomar homer on its own, if the Jays don't get to the World Series and win it, we probably don't talk about it at all. We don't talk about it like that. It's just a.
And the thing is about that one was that a lot of people don't know, I guess, but Eckersley used to tip a slider with a little glove tap. And Cito, who is probably one of the best people I've ever, he's acknowledged as being one of the best people at spotting pitchers tipping pitches. They were on to that, and anyway, I think I might have helped Alomar on that at bat. But that was, I remember when the Jays got Cito, David Cohn in '92, and the first thing Cito said to David was, "We've got your pitches, Dave." He said, "What?"
Wow.
FYI. And you know what? That's been my hobby ever since. I talked to Cito about that, and I can't do it as well as him because a lot of times I'm obviously looking down at the computer, but that's one of my hobbies is predicting it. Guys tipping pitches.
Oh, interesting.
And telegraphing pitches.
Are you the man in white?
You know what? I remember at Fenway.
Yeah.
And I wasn't writing. I was just there as a spectator. And I was sitting down, and I was behind home plate. And Eduardo Rodriguez, I think it was. And he tipped in his delivery, he tipped his changeup. It was a different arm slot, and it was a little bit slower. And so I started calling. And I love, if anything I can do that I enjoy the most is aggravating Fenway Park fans, okay? Because they're a bunch of know-it-alls. And so I'd say, here comes a changeup. And then, bingo, there would go up on the board, changeup.
Right.
And I did that a few times. And then I yelled out, I said, this one, he's telegraphed this more than any other of his change-ups. And Teoscar Hernandez thought the same. He jumped all over it and hit it like about 400 feet. And by then I was getting a few glowers which made me feel good. And when I would go back to my cousin Boston, who worked who was the Harvard guy, and lived in Stoughton, even when the Blue Jays got a team, he was a huge baseball fan. He was an incredible Red Sox fan, and if I wanted to find out anything about the Red Sox, because he had a scientific mind, he devoured everything, right? He could repeat every stat, everything about the Red Sox. So I never had to read the papers. I just had to talk to John.
So obviously 2 World Series that you were covering, and in 2009, you leave the Globe and Mail. We mentioned that you covered baseball after that for MLB.com, the Canadian Press, Baseball America, the Sport Exchange, and various other newspapers. But why did you leave in 2009? Is it just they offered you a package, or what happened?
Okay, well, they took me off the baseball beat in 2006. They put me on the soccer beat, Toronto FC.
Sure.
I really enjoyed that. I loved it. Talk about first-year team, and everybody's cooperative, and I was lucky enough to get a lot of scoops, because I knew how to work Mo Johnson, and I knew when to phone him up. And I did, you know, so I really enjoyed that year, and I did it for the first part of 2008, but they wanted me to go on the desk because they had a shortage on the desk, and that got into a bit of a situation. The guild thought I was being treated unfairly, and I was told by lawyers it was ageism, and so. I won the right to report again, mixing it with some desk. And then when they offered a buyout, I guess it was in January of 2009, so I took it. I wasn't going to. 2 weeks I mulled it over, right? I said, I didn't fight this hard to get back to reporting, to then just walk out. And then one morning I woke up and said, are you stupid? Are you
funny,
stupid?
Because I mentioned Schultz earlier, who's going to be here tomorrow because we record this thing called Every Spring a Parade Down Bay Street with Garrett Joyce, and they're going to be here tomorrow afternoon. And he plays Red York, Schultz. But Schultz,
yeah, I've heard that.
Yeah, so we're going to record a 5th episode tomorrow, actually.
Oh, great.
It's amazing. I get to play Ollie Thumbs, the producer. Okay, but what am I saying? Oh, Schultz, he says to me when he came on, he said he was hoping for an opportunity for buyouts because I guess they'd have these meetings and announce that we're going to offer whatever. And he said when they announced they were offering buyouts, he had to like bite his lip so that he didn't like scream with excitement and start jumping up and down because he was just really waiting for a buyout offer, and it came and he took it, and he's been happy ever since there. But
I'll tell you, my situation is a little different because I'll tell you what.
Yeah.
In 65, when I turned 65, remember they had done away with compulsory retirement. So I was staying, myself and Michael Velpe, who's a columnist and reporter at the Globe. And so we were going to work on beyond 65. And I don't think they liked that too much. Mm-hmm. So they said, oh, okay, you can do that, but you can't qualify for the benefits program anymore. So Michael and I fought it through the Guild.
Okay.
And they gave in, and they said, okay, you can belong to the benefits program and still, when you're working after 65. But, you know, I don't want to get into it but that sums up the way the Globe and Mail has become. So I can see why Dave would celebrate. You know what I mean?
The Post Media just offered a bunch, so Steve Buffrey's gone now, no longer working there.
Steve Buffrey's a terrific guy, and I remember talking with John Kernahan. He used to work at the Spectator, Hamilton Spectator, and we were talking about different people we knew, and the word that John came up with, Steve, was authentic. And I can't think of better praise and a better word to describe Beezer.
He also spent the last few years covering TFC.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And just shout out to Liz Braun, not a sports writer, but she took a package after decades at The Sun, and she's going to drop by here for her exit interview, and we're going to talk about it. So Liz Braun coming back to Toronto Mic'd shortly. But Larry, we left enough for a sequel, I think, but you were absolutely incredible. Are the Blue Jays going to win the World Series this year?
Probably not, but I wouldn't. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. You know, I think Toronto fans should be excited about this team. The one concern I might have is the bullpen, you know, leading up to Romano. But the thing is, it's different now. It's not like it used to be. So look what Alex did with the Braves. If you make a couple of the key trades at midseason, you don't have to win your division anymore. And we've shown that home field advantage isn't all it's cut up to be. And the Jays are good proof of that last year.
Right.
So if I wouldn't, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You know, it wouldn't surprise me, but I can think there's other teams that I would pick ahead of them at this stage. That's all. But I think this is a good team, and it's a fairly complete team, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun for the fans.
How was this for you? You had a good time making your Toronto Mike debut?
I loved it. You know, I tend to wander sometimes, so I apologize if I didn't completely answer the question, like about Cecil Fielder. You know, the fact that he got over to Japan and got to play every day, because he had the potential. Like when he was a rookie ball, man, he hit a ball so far, and that's what the Jays were attracted to him.
Right.
Is he and made the trade, right? He hit a ball so far, and they could see the potential there, and it just gave him a chance to play every day is what he needed. He wasn't going to get it in Toronto. He was going to get it in Detroit.
Did you ever see his son hitting at the Dome in
I remember his son on the charter flights. When son was 2 years old, he looked like he was 5. Prince was big.
Yeah.
He was a big kid. And I did see him take batting practice. And I got another one for you. When they got Fred McGriff in that trade, and mainly the big headliner was Dave Collins from the Yankees.
Yeah.
I remember Fred McGriff taking batting practice for the first time after the trade and Dave Collins looked at it and he says, "Are you sure I wasn't the throw-in in the trade?" And there's a story behind that trade, but maybe we should leave it for another time if you want to have it back.
That's up to you. I will say Dave Collins still holds the franchise record for stolen bases in a season with 60.
Yes.
Something Devon White and Alomar couldn't beat.
Well, yeah, and I think that was in a time when, in the 70s and 80s, I think a lot of people stole a lot more bases. And I think some of them were stolen for the sake of stealing bases. I think what's come out as analytics is showing that, and Bill James started it. He started out, that's how we started with this thing. He said, he set out to prove that stolen bases were important, and he found that it was just the opposite.
Yeah.
That you had to be successful at a certain rate before they were valuable, you know? And that's how he became a sabermetrician. That's how it started.
Love it. Is there any story that didn't get prompted for or didn't come out in this episode that you're going to be on your way home saying, "Oh, I meant to tell this story or that story"? This is like a moment here. I'm bringing down the closing theme because I realize there might be something in the chamber there that you need to let into the wilderness here, Larry. This is your opportunity.
Do you want to know the Fred McGriff story?
Yeah, now let's do it. Just we have enough for the sequel without that one. Let's get the Fred McGriff story.
The Jays had this guy who can't remember his name right now, but he had about 14 saves. He's a great guy. Anyway, he was such a great guy. Why can't I remember his name right now? But anyway, I remember him come out of the dugout one day when he was still with the Jays. He says, "Where is everybody?" He says, "They're at they're at the church." He says, "Oh, yeah, I always wanted to do that," he says, "but they always have it on Sunday morning." Anyway, they traded him, and they got, so one of the, Steinbrenner wanted him so bad that, they gave up Dave Collins, and then, but Gillick always liked to get a throw in, and they had their eye on McGriff because they'd seen him hit some mammoth home runs as an A-ball.
I'll bet.
And maybe it was even rookie ball. But anyway, so Gillick held out, and he knew Steinbrenner would get impatient and get involved in the talks. So Steinbrenner got in, and Gillick said, "I have to have a minor leaguer." And he said, "Okay." It was Dale Murray was the pitcher.
Okay.
And he said, "Okay, here's the deal." He says, "You name 3 minor leaguers, and or we'll name." How did this go now? He said, "Name 3 minor leaguers who you want, and we'll tell you which one you can have." So the first one they named was Don Mattingly. They knew he wasn't going to give up.
Right.
Next one was Dan Pasqua, who everybody thought was going to be a great hitter.
Right.
And people would say that the ball made a different sound when it hit his bat, But the guy they really wanted was Fred. Well, they would have taken Mattingly, obviously. But then they named Fred McGriff. Steinbrenner never heard of Fred McGriff because he was so far down in the system.
Right.
That's how they got him.
Wow.
And
then I have a follow-up question.
When they made the trade, I called Fred McGriff's home in Tampa, and his mother says, "Freddie's not home right now. He's at work. He's worked at I think it was a Publix store. It's one of those big chain stores." He says, "But if you call back tomorrow at 7 a.m, he says, "That's kind of early." He says, "Don't worry, he'll answer." So I phoned him at 7 a.m. He answered.
Wow. Okay. Quick question here before we say goodbye here. I'm a big George Bell fan, as mentioned, and I was always told, and you're going to confirm if this is true or not, Bobby Cox liked to play Dave Collins in left field, and
they platooned him at first, yeah.
And then Pat Gillick wanted George Bell to get playing time, and I mean, and then the coach, the manager, sorry, Bobby Cox would play Dave Collins. So Pat Gillick traded Dave Collins just so Bobby Cox would have to play George Bell. Have you? This is something I was told. Any truth to that? Does it sound plausible at least?
Well, don't forget they needed a closer, and they got Bill Cottle. So.
Right. Well, yeah. Who got referenced?
And they also traded Alfredo Griffin because they had Tony Fernandez coming up. So.
Right. Embarrassment of riches there.
Yeah.
All right, Larry. I think we kept enough for the sequel here,
Okay.
but what a debut, man! Do you want to know how long we went?
No.
All right,
I enjoyed
it
every
would shock
minute
you.
of it. I enjoyed every minute of it.
It would shock you, but to me, it wasn't long enough.
I just
so.
hope I didn't bore anybody.
No, are you kidding me? All that matters is me, Larry, and I was enthralled.
Okay.
So, and that brings us to the end of our 1,231st show. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Toronto Mike. Okay, Larry, how do we follow you? Is there any social media presence for you or a website you want us to
actually,
go to?
some of those stories from Reuters you see in advance as previews of Leafs, Raptors, or Blue Jays games are mine.
Okay.
Globe uses them quite a bit. Isn't that ironic?
That's funny.
And also, they use our previews. If you go into scoreboards, say of the New York Times, they have a scoreboard section there, and so you go into the games, and the previews are field level media. So some of those are mine.
Love it.
Yeah.
Our friends at Great Lakes Brewery are at Great Lakes Beer. I'll be recording live from the GLB Brew Pub on Thursday evening. Palma Pasta is at Palma Pasta. Moneris is at Moneris. Season 4 of Yes, We Are Open is now available. Al Grego hosts, and yes, he's an award winner. My Recycle My Electronics are at EPRA_Canada, and everybody can go to recyclemyelectronics.ca to find out where they can drop off their antiquated old tech. Don't throw that into the garbage. We don't want it in the landfill. Go to recyclemyelectronics.ca. The Moment Lab, they're at The Moment Lab. Welcome aboard, guys. And Ridley Funeral Home are at Ridley FH. See you all Thursday when my guest is Edward Keenan from the Toronto Star.
And I don't know what the future can hold or will do for me and you, but I'm a much better man for having known you. Oh, you know that's true, because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away, 'cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've been told that there's a sucker born every day, but I wonder who, yeah, I wonder who. Maybe the one who doesn't realize there's 1,000 shades of gray. 'Cause I know that's true, yes I do. I know it's true, yeah, I know it's true. How about you? Oh, they're picking up trash and they're putting down roads, and they're brokering stocks, the class struggle explodes. And I'll play this guitar just the best that I can. Well, maybe I'm not, and maybe I am. Ah, who gives a damn? Because everything is coming up rosy and green. Yeah, the wind is cold, but the smell of snow warms me today. And your smile is fine, and it's just like mine, and it won't go away. 'Cause everything is rosy and green. Well, I've kissed you in France, and I've kissed you in Spain, and I've kissed you in places I better not name. And I've seen the sun go down on Sacré-Cœur, but I